Hey everyone, and welcome back to Complicated Stuff on the Girl Has It All channel. I'm Thomas, and I'm so excited for us to jump into episode 14.
And I'm Jenna, the resident quantum expert here and also part of the Girl Has It All team.
Yeah, and today we're going to be looking at emotional intelligence. This is something that I think we all think about quite a bit. It's a buzzword that we hear all the time. But what does it actually mean? And why should we care?
Well, it's not just about being nice or, touchy-feely. Emotional intelligence, or EI, is really about understanding and managing your own emotions, but also being able to recognize and empathize with the emotions of others. And, research from the Journal of Psychology actually shows that people with higher EI have greater satisfaction in their relationships.
So then why is that? What is the magic formula?
Well, it's not magic, but it can feel like it when it works. One key factor is something called empathic accuracy, which is basically the ability to accurately perceive your partner's emotions. It's like tuning into their emotional frequency. So when you're good at this, you can respond with sensitivity and understanding, which can really help you avoid those unnecessary arguments that can strain a relationship.
So it's not just about knowing what your partner is feeling, but it's also knowing how to react in a way that strengthens the bond rather than creating more distance.
Exactly. Now let's think about leadership for a second. Imagine a leader who always seems polished and in control, never showing any vulnerability. They might seem impressive at first glance, but this kind of Teflon leader can actually create emotional distance and hinder genuine growth.
I've definitely encountered those types of leaders before. They seem almost afraid to show any cracks in their armor.
Yeah.
But you're saying that vulnerability can actually be a strength, especially for leaders.
Absolutely. When a leader shows vulnerability, it creates a space for others to do the same. It builds trust and allows for more authentic connections, which are essential for any successful team.
That's such an interesting shift in perspective. I think we're often conditioned to see vulnerability as a weakness, especially in professional settings.
Right, but what if embracing vulnerability is actually the key to unlocking deeper connections and achieving greater success? This idea of transitioning from a Teflon leader to a more transformative leader is a big one, so let's unpack that a bit more.
Okay, let's unpack it. How do we go from Teflon to transformative? What are the steps involved in this evolution?
Well, it all starts with acknowledging the need for change. It's about recognizing those Teflon patterns in ourselves, maybe deflecting feedback, avoiding tough conversations, or downplaying our struggles. We have to be willing to look in the mirror and say, hey, maybe I need to loosen up this Teflon coating a bit.
That takes a lot of self-awareness and honesty.
It does, but it's the first step toward becoming a more authentic and impactful leader. And once we've acknowledged the need for change, the next step is to cultivate curiosity.
Curiosity. How does that tie into becoming a better leader?
Well, think about it. Curiosity is all about asking questions, exploring new perspectives, and being open to learning. And great leaders are constantly learning and growing. They don't pretend to have all the answers. Instead, they approach situations with a sense of wonder and a willingness to be surprised.
So instead of always feeling like we need to have a solution ready, we can approach challenges with more openness and a willingness to learn from others.
Exactly. And this leads us to the next crucial step, embracing vulnerability as a path to growth. Remember how we were talking about those Teflon leaders who seem afraid to show any cracks? Well, embracing vulnerability is about letting go of that need to appear perfect and allowing ourselves to be seen for who we truly are, imperfections and all.
I'm starting to see how this all ties together. By acknowledging our need for change, cultivating curiosity, and embracing vulnerability, we're essentially creating a foundation for building emotional intelligence. But what does that actually look like in practice?
It's about developing specific skills, like becoming more attuned to the subtle cues, both verbal and nonverbal, that reveal what's going on beneath the surface.
So it's like learning to read between the lines, not just in our own interactions, but also in observing how other people interact. It's about becoming more perceptive.
Precisely. It's about understanding the why behind people's actions and reactions, and it's about learning to listen. Really listen without judgment, and to connect with people on a deeper, more empathetic level.
This is all making so much sense, but I have to admit, it feels a bit overwhelming. It's like you're describing a whole new way of being in the world.
It can feel that way at first, but remember, building emotional intelligence is a journey, not a destination. It's about taking small steps every day, like practicing mindfulness, being more intentional with our communication, and reflecting on our experiences.
And that brings us to the final step in this transformation, the importance of self-reflection. It's like taking a step back to examine our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors.
Exactly. It's about holding up that mirror and really seeing ourselves, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and doing it with compassion and honesty.
But how do we actually make self-reflection a regular practice What are some specific things we can do?
Well, journaling is a great tool for self-reflection. It allows us to process our thoughts and feelings in a safe and private space. And meditation can also be incredibly helpful for cultivating self-awareness.
Meditation can be tricky for me, but I've found that even taking a walk in nature can be a form of self-reflection. It's about creating that space for stillness and allowing ourselves to just be.
Absolutely. And the key is to make self-reflection a regular practice, not just something we do once in a while when we're feeling lost or overwhelmed.
So it's about making that commitment to self-discovery and growth.
Exactly. And, the more we engage in self-reflection, the more we deepen our understanding of ourselves, our motivations, and our impact on the world around us.
This has been so insightful. I'm really starting to see how emotional intelligence is like the foundation for everything we want to achieve in life. Our relationships, our careers, our overall well-being. But let's shift gears a bit. We've talked about leadership, but what about romantic relationships? How can we spot emotional intelligence in a potential partner?
Oh, that's a great question. Emotional intelligence is just as important in our personal lives as it is in our professional lives. Actually, it can be the key to building healthy and fulfilling relationships.
But how do we actually know if someone is emotionally intelligent? What signs should we be looking for?
One of the biggest indicators is self-awareness. Emotionally intelligent people have a really good understanding of their own emotions. They're able to identify what they're feeling and why they're feeling that way. And they're not afraid to talk about their feelings openly and honestly without getting defensive or blaming others.
Makes sense. I can't imagine trying to build a lasting relationship with someone who is unable or unwilling to communicate their feelings.
Yeah, it can be really challenging. And another key sign of emotional intelligence is curiosity. Think back to what we were saying about leaders. The best leaders are always learning and growing. Same goes for relationships. You want to be with someone who's genuinely interested in you, who asks thoughtful questions, and who's eager to learn more about your thoughts, feelings, and experiences.
Curiosity is such an attractive quality. It shows that they're engaged and invested in the relationship.
Exactly. And it suggests that they're open to new experiences and willing to step outside of their comfort zones, which can lead to a lot of fun and adventure together.
So we've got self-awareness and curiosity. What other qualities should we be looking for in an emotionally intelligent partner?
Self-sufficiency is a big one. You want to be with someone who's able to take care of themselves emotionally. They're not constantly relying on you to meet their needs or to fix their problems. They have a sense of inner stability, and they're able to regulate their own emotions effectively.
Right, you don't want to feel like you're walking on eggshells all the time worrying about triggering an emotional outburst.
Yeah, exactly. And it's important to look for someone who has healthy boundaries. Emotionally intelligent people are aware of their limits, and they're not afraid to assert those limits in a respectful way. They're not pushovers, but they're also not controlling or manipulative.
So it's about finding that balance between being assertive and being respectful of your partner's needs.
Precisely. Here's a pro tip. Pay attention to how they interact with other people. Do they have strong, healthy relationships with their friends and family? If so, it's a good sign that they have the emotional intelligence to navigate relationships effectively.
Because those relationship skills are transferable, right? What you learn in one relationship can help you in others.
Absolutely. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about some of those subtle phrases that can actually be red flags when it comes to emotional intelligence. You might be surprised to learn that some of the things we say in everyday conversation can actually reveal a lot about our emotional awareness or lack thereof.
Oh, I'm all ears for this. I'm sure we've all used some of these phrases without even realizing how they might be impacting the people around us.
You're probably right. Let's start with a classic. Whatever. It seems harmless enough, but it's actually a pretty dismissive phrase that can signal a lack of emotional intelligence.
Yeah, I can see that. It's like we're shutting down the conversation and saying, I don't care enough to even engage with you.
Exactly. An emotionally intelligent person would strive to express their thoughts and feelings more clearly, even if they disagree or feel frustrated.
So instead of just dismissing the other person's perspective, they might say something like, I hear what you're saying, but I see things differently, or can we talk more about this? I'm not sure I understand your point of view.
Exactly. It's about acknowledging the other person's feelings and being willing to engage in a more constructive dialogue.
Okay, that makes sense. What about another common phrase? You always.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
You always is a form of generalization that can be very damaging in relationships. It puts the other person in a box and makes assumptions about their behavior without allowing for any nuance or complexity.
I know I've been on the receiving end of you always statements, and it feels terrible. It's like I'm being attacked and there's no room for me to defend myself or explain my actions.
Exactly. An emotionally intelligent person would avoid making those kinds of sweeping generalizations. Instead of saying, "You always interrupt me," they might say, "I feel frustrated when I'm interrupted." Can we please try to be more mindful of each other's space when we're talking?
That's a much more effective way to communicate, and it's less likely to escalate into an argument.
Right. It shows that you're taking responsibility for your own feelings rather than blaming the other person.
Okay, here's another one that I think we're all guilty of using at some point. I knew you were going to say that.
Ah, yes. That one can be tricky because it might seem like we're just trying to be funny or relatable, but it can actually signal a lack of genuine engagement in the conversation.
Yeah, it's like we're more interested in being right or appearing clever than we are in actually listening to and understanding the other person.
Exactly. And it can make the other person feel like their thoughts and feelings aren't being valued.
So instead of trying to predict what the other person is going to say, an emotionally intelligent person would be fully present in the conversation, listening with an open mind and a willingness to be surprised.
Absolutely. They'd approach the conversation with a sense of humility and a willingness to learn.
Okay, let's keep going with these phrases. What about, "It's not my fault"?
That's a classic example of blame shifting, and it's a sure sign of low emotional intelligence. When we use that phrase, we're refusing to take responsibility for our actions and the impact they have on others.
It's like we're trying to protect our ego at all costs, even if it means throwing someone else under the bus.
Exactly. And it prevents us from learning from our mistakes and growing as individuals.
An emotionally intelligent person would be more likely to say something like, "I made a mistake, and I'm sorry for the impact it had. How can I make things right?"
Exactly. They would acknowledge their role in the situation and be willing to take ownership of their actions. And sometimes it really is someone else's fault. But even then, an emotionally intelligent person would find a way to address the situation without resorting to blame and accusations.
Okay, what about, "I don't care"?
That one can be particularly hurtful because it conveys a lack of empathy and concern for the other person. It's like we're saying that their thoughts and feelings are irrelevant to us.
Like saying, "You don't matter to me."
Right, and it can make the other person feel unimportant and unseen.
An emotionally intelligent person would recognize that even if they don't fully understand or agree with the other person's perspective, their feelings are still valid.
Exactly. They might say something like, "I appreciate you sharing that with me, even though I see things differently, or I can see that this is really important to you. Can you help me understand why?"
It's about validating the other person's experience, even if you don't share their perspective.
Okay, this is also helpful. I feel like I'm already becoming more aware of my own language patterns. That's fantastic. It's all about raising that self-awareness and recognizing that our words have power. They can build people up or tear them down.
So let's keep going with these phrases. What about, "You're too sensitive"?
That's another one that can be really damaging because it invalidates the other person's feelings and experiences. It's like we're telling them that their emotional response is wrong or inappropriate.
I hate it when people say that. It makes me feel like I need to suppress my emotions or pretend that I'm not bothered by things that actually do bother me.
Like we're being told that our feelings are a burden or a problem.
Exactly. An emotionally intelligent person would recognize that everyone has different emotional sensitivities and thresholds. They wouldn't judge or criticize someone for having those feelings.
Right. Instead, they might say something like, "I can see that this is really upsetting for you and I want to understand why."
It's about showing empathy and compassion rather than judgment and criticism. Okay, what about this one? I should break it to you, but it seems harmless enough, but I have a feeling you're going to tell me it's a red flag.
You're catching on. While it might seem like we're just trying to soften the blow of bad news, it can actually add unnecessary drama and tension to the situation.
Right, it's like we're relishing in the fact that we have bad news to deliver.
Exactly. It's almost as if we're trying to draw attention to ourselves as the bearer of bad news. It's better to just be direct and empathetic without adding that extra layer of drama.
So instead of saying, "I hate to break it to you, but the project's been canceled," we could say something like, "I'm so sorry, but I have some disappointing news about the project."
It's about being honest and straightforward while also acknowledging the impact the news might have on the other person.
Okay, what about, "That's just who I am"? I feel like people use this one all the time as an excuse for bad behavior.
You're absolutely right. While it's true that we all have our own unique personalities and quirks, using that phrase as an excuse for negative or hurtful behavior is a sign of low emotional intelligence.
Because it suggests that we're not willing to change or grow.
Exactly. It suggests a lack of self-awareness and an unwillingness to take responsibility for our actions.
An emotionally intelligent person would be more open to feedback and willing to make changes if their behavior is hurting others.
Absolutely. They understand that personal growth is an ongoing process, and they're committed to becoming the best versions of themselves.
Okay, here's another one. It's not a big deal. I use this one all the time to try to make people feel better when they're upset.
That one can be a bit tricky. While it can sometimes be helpful to reassure someone that everything is okay, it can also be dismissive and invalidating if we use it to downplay their feelings.
If someone is genuinely upset about something, telling them it's not a big deal can make them feel like their feelings aren't being heard or respected.
Exactly. An emotionally intelligent person would validate the other person's feelings, even if they don't fully understand why they're feeling that way.
So instead of saying, it's not a big deal, they might say, I can see that you're really upset about this. Can you tell me more about what's bothering you?
Exactly. It's about creating a safe space for the other person to express their feelings and feel heard.
Okay, I'm ready for one more. Give me another red flag phrase that we should all try to avoid.
How about this one? Whatever you say.
Ooh, that one sounds passive aggressive.
It can be. It's often used as a way to shut down the conversation and avoid further conflict, but it can come across as dismissive and disrespectful.
It's like we're saying, I don't really care what you think, so I'm just going to agree with you to make this conversation end.
Exactly. An emotionally intelligent person would be more assertive in expressing their own opinions and needs, even if it means having a difficult conversation.
So they might say something like, I hear your perspective, but I have some concerns about that. Could we talk about it more?
Precisely. It's about being willing to engage in healthy conflict and finding a resolution that works for both parties.
This has been so eye-opening. I'm definitely going to be much more mindful of my language from now on.
That's great to hear. And it's important to remember that we all make mistakes in communication. The key is to be open to feedback, to apologize when we've hurt someone, and to strive to do better next time.
I think that's a great segue into another aspect of emotional intelligence that we haven't really talked about yet, its impact on our overall well-being. It's not just about our relationships with others, right?
You're absolutely right. Emotional intelligence also has a profound impact on our own mental and emotional health.
Okay, I'm really interested to hear more about that.
Yeah.
How does emotional intelligence affect our well-being?
Well, when we're emotionally intelligent, we're better equipped to deal with stress and adversity. We're able to recognize our own emotions, understand where they're coming from, and find healthy ways to manage them.
So we're less likely to get overwhelmed by our emotions or to let them control us.
Exactly. Instead of reacting impulsively or getting stuck in negative thought patterns, we can respond to challenging situations in a more thoughtful and constructive way.
So we're less likely to experience anxiety, depression, or other mental health challenges.
There's definitely a correlation. Studies have shown that people with higher emotional intelligence tend to report higher levels of happiness, life satisfaction, and overall well-being.
That makes sense. When we're able to manage our emotions effectively, we're less likely to feel overwhelmed by stress, negativity, or self-doubt.
Exactly. And we're more likely to feel confident, resilient, and capable of navigating the ups and downs of life.
This is all so fascinating. It seems like emotional intelligence is the key to unlocking so many areas of our lives, from our relationships to our careers to our own personal well-being. And speaking of well-being, we came across some really interesting research that highlights the connection between emotional intelligence and happiness, particularly in the context of medical students.
Yeah, a study published in the Korean Journal of Medical Education found that medical students with higher emotional intelligence actually reported feeling healthier and happier.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I can imagine how challenging and demanding medical school must be, both emotionally and mentally.
It's a high-pressure environment with long hours, intense workloads, and constant exposure to human suffering. But the study found that students with higher EI were better able to cope with the stress and demands of medical school. They reported lower levels of anxiety and depression, and they were more likely to feel a sense of accomplishment and satisfaction in their studies.
So it's not just about being smart or having good grades. It's about having the emotional intelligence to navigate the challenges and pressures of medical school and beyond.
Exactly. And the researchers found that these students weren't just happier in the moment, they were also more likely to report feeling optimistic about their future careers as doctors.
Yeah, that's a really important point. Emotional intelligence isn't just about surviving, it's about thriving. It's about having the emotional resources to not only cope with stress, but to actually find meaning and fulfillment in our work.
Exactly. And I think this research has some really important implications for all of us, not just those in the medical field. It suggests that emotional intelligence is a valuable asset for anyone who wants to succeed in life, both personally and professionally.
It's about building those inner resources that allow us to navigate challenges, build resilience, and find joy in the journey.
Absolutely. And the best part is emotional intelligence is a skill that we can all develop and strengthen over time.
It's empowering to know that we're not stuck with whatever level of emotional intelligence we currently have. We can actually make a conscious effort to grow and evolve.
Exactly. And there are so many resources available to help us on that journey, from books and articles to workshops and therapy. And even just having conversations like this one, where we're exploring these concepts and sharing our experiences, can be incredibly helpful.
Well said. I think this has been an amazing exploration of emotional intelligence and its impact on our lives. But before we wrap up, I wanted to touch on one more point that's been on my mind. We've talked a lot about how to build emotional intelligence, but is it even possible to improve our emotional intelligence if we've struggled with it in the past?
Absolutely. And it really is. It's never too late to start working on our emotional intelligence.
That's really encouraging. I think sometimes people feel like their emotional intelligence is set in stone. They think they're either born with it or they're not.
Yeah, I know it can feel that way sometimes. But emotional intelligence is like a muscle. The more we use it, the stronger it gets.
So what advice would you give to someone who wants to improve their emotional intelligence but doesn't really know where to start?
Well, I think the first step is to simply become more aware of our own emotions. Just start paying attention to how you're feeling throughout the day. Notice those subtle shifts in your mood and, try to identify the triggers that cause those shifts.
So it's about developing that self-awareness that we were talking about earlier.
Exactly. Once you're more aware of your own emotions, you can start to develop strategies for managing them effectively.
Like finding healthy outlets for stress and frustration, learning to communicate your needs assertively, and practicing empathy and compassion in your interactions with others.
Precisely. And remember, building emotional intelligence is a journey, not a destination. It's about taking small steps every day and being patient with yourself along the way.
This has been such an inspiring and informative conversation.
Yeah.
I feel like I've learned so much.
Me too. It's been a pleasure exploring these complex ideas with you.
And for all of our listeners, thank you so much for joining us on this journey into the world of emotional intelligence. We hope this has given you some valuable insights that you can apply to your own lives.
And remember, it's never too late to start cultivating your emotional intelligence. It's a lifelong journey of growth and self-discovery, and the rewards are well worth the effort.
Absolutely. And we are here to support you every step of the way.
So be sure to connect with us. We would love to hear your thoughts on this episode and, any other topics that you'd like for us to explore in the future.
Thanks for tuning in to Complicated Stuff. We'll see you next time.